Here's something the big box stores will never put on a banner above the mower aisle. While retailers like Home Depot continue pushing hard toward an aggressive battery-powered future, a growing number of brand-new, gas-powered zero-turns are arriving on dealer lots, getting parked under the showroom lights, and then just sitting there rotting in the elements. That should absolutely not be happening with machines that wear iconic badges Americans have trusted for decades, or from legendary brands that once completely dominated the residential cutting market. But in 2026, capability alone is no longer enough to save an outdated platform, because today's research-driven buyers are comparing actual build specifications, regional dealer support networks, transmission quality, and long-term chassis durability harder than ever before. And certain zero-turns are completely losing that comparison the exact moment shoppers start doing their homework right next to the machine. Let's be perfectly clear from the very first sentence, because exposing these manufacturing contradictions is the entire point of this channel. The reason these specific units are stranded and accumulating dust isn't always because of a bad engine or a thin deck, but because the corporate brand secretly changed ownership behind the scenes, the dealer network completely shrank when nobody was looking, or the factory slapped on a ridiculous price tag that the current market simply refuses to agree with. Over the next few minutes, we are bypassing the corporate marketing fluff and exposing the 5 specific zero-turns that dealers are completely failing to move in 2026, along with the real, verified reasons why smart buyers keep walking away. Starting with a massive household name that looks exactly like the safe choice most people would buy without a single second thought. Let's start with the Troy-Bilt Mustang Z42, because this is the exact machine I'd bet is already parked under the showroom lights at your local Home Depot or Tractor Supply right now, looking like the calm, sensible, can't-go-wrong choice. And here's the thing, Troy-Bilt earned that comfortable feeling honestly, over generations. This is a heritage name that built real, undeniable trust in American backyards back when it stood for tough, dependable garden tillers that simply refused to quit. Your dad or your granddad probably trusted that badge on their land, and that emotional equity is completely real. But the company selling you a Troy-Bilt zero-turn in 2026 isn't the legend from those stories. It's one of several labels living under the MTD umbrella, which Stanley Black & Decker fully bought in late 2021. The same corporate roof that also builds Cadet, yard machines, and a handful of others. Shared platforms, shared components, shared cost decisions, with a different paint job and a famous sticker on top. The name still carries weight at the register. The machine underneath has to earn it on its own now. So let me be completely fair before I get critical, because the Mustang is not garbage. It runs a 22 horsepower Kohler 7000 series twin. And yes, Kohler, not the Briggs engine you'll hear some folks online insist it has. It sits on a fully welded 2-inch tubular steel frame that's genuinely solid for the price and backed by a limited lifetime frame warranty. For a small, mostly flat yard, bought from a store with easy returns and parts on the shelf, it will absolutely cut your grass for years. Here's where it starts losing the argument. That 42-inch deck is stamped from thin 13-gauge sheet metal, while several competitors sitting at this exact price, somewhere around $2,700 to $2,900, hand you a thicker or fully fabricated welded deck built to shrug off debris over a decade. Underneath, it rides on a Hydro Gear EZT 2200, an entry-level sealed residential transaxle. And while that unit is fine for light, level mowing, plenty of owners report it running hot and showing its limits if you start pushing it across hills or rough ground. That's owner feedback, not a guarantee, but it's a pattern worth knowing before you spend $3,000. And in my view, that's the quiet problem. The Mustang isn't lingering because nobody wants a Troy-Bilt. It's that today's buyer can pull up these exact specs on their phone, right there on the showroom floor. realize they're getting a smaller, lighter-duty deck and entry-level hydraulics for the same money the brand next door asks for fabricated steel, and just walk away. The badge used to close that sale on loyalty alone. In 2026, the spec sheet quietly talks them out of it. That's why you'll keep catching this one hit with markdowns and sitting longer than it should. Not because it can't mow, but because the math stopped flattering it. And speaking of that same corporate family, the very next machine wears a more premium badge from the exact same roof, asks you for several $100s more, and hides a twist where the version most people grab actually ships with the cheapest built deck in its own lineup. You're going to want to see how that one shakes out. Next up is the Cadet Ultima Z T142, a machine that perfectly illustrates how a premium brand can wrap beautiful styling around a massive mechanical contradiction. On a showroom floor, this unit looks incredibly beefy, with its continuous 2-inch square tubular steel frame, automotive-grade e-coat paint, and an ultra-comfortable high-back seat. But the moment you strip away that aggressive yellow styling, you realize the engineering team executed a classic structural mismatch. While Cadet heavily markets their heavy-duty fabricated decks on larger models, the big box store configurations of this 42-inch unit are frequently downgraded to a light-duty 13-gauge stamped steel shell. The real irony here is that they pair this thin, fragile pan with a highly powerful, high-torque engine like the Kohler 7000 Pro Series or a twin-cylinder Kawasaki. Slapping that much rotational force onto a wafer-thin stamped deck is a total design oversight. The intense motor vibration means that if an owner clips a hidden tree root or hard clay at full speed, that thin shell is highly prone to warping permanently out of tracking alignment. This structural bottleneck is compounded by a severe physical limitation in the machine's footprint. Because it utilizes a narrow 42-inch layout, the outer lip of the cutting deck has almost zero overhang past the track of the wide rear drive tires. This makes precise trimming next to physical obstacles an absolute nightmare, as you cannot slide the deck edge against walls or flower beds without the rubber tires rubbing and tearing up the turf, ultimately forcing you to do twice as much secondary weed eating. Underneath, it relies on the same entry-level, non-serviceable Hydro Gear EZT 2200 transaxles we warned you about earlier, meaning any severe internal heat wear forces a complete, expensive replacement rather than a simple fluid change. As we move through 2026, dealers are getting so desperate to clear out this specific stamped inventory that they are actively pushing direct factory rebates and 0% financing just to move them. But today's buyers are looking past the shiny financing terms, recognizing the structural mismatch under the frame, and leaving these units to sit unbought on the lot. Next up on our lot sitter list is the Snapper 360Z, and this one is a flat-out heartbreaking example of how corporate financial failure can completely alienate an incredibly loyal, old-school consumer base. For decades, the Snapper brand was an absolute cornerstone of the American residential mowing landscape, legendary for building those indestructible rear-engine riding mowers that ran on simple mechanical friction discs and literally lasted for 40 years in local backyards. When Briggs & Stratton took over the brand, they attempted to modernize that legacy by pushing out the 360Z zero-turn lineup. Under the showroom lights, this machine does its absolute best to signal that historic ruggedness, boasting a fully welded steel frame, thick front caster mounts, and a highly unique open cargo bed on the back that lets homeowners easily haul mulch, tools, or cooler jugs around their property. But the moment you dig into the actual engineering under the chassis, you realize where the factory cut corners to meet a tight budget. The biggest mechanical vulnerability on the 360Z sits inside the cutting deck itself, where the team installed cast aluminum spindle housings instead of commercial-grade cast iron. Cast aluminum is highly susceptible to intense heat retention and lacks structural density, meaning if a homeowner clips a stray rock or hard landscape debris at full operating speed, those aluminum housings are notorious for cracking or snapping entirely under stress. This structural issue is paired with a massive annoyance right at the back of the machine. While that rear cargo bed looks fantastic on the showroom floor, in real-world operation, the raw vibration from the engine transfers directly into the metal box, creating an incredibly loud metallic rattling noise the second you toss tools or gear into the back. But the absolute fatal blow causing the 360Z to rot on dealer lots in 2026 has everything to do with the complete, catastrophic collapse of its corporate backing. Following Briggs & Stratton's massive corporate bankruptcy and subsequent messy financial restructuring, the independent snapper dealer network was completely fractured and left for dead. Today's modern buyers are incredibly research-driven. They pull up the dealer locator map on their phones right next to the machine and quickly realize that if a proprietary deck belt snaps, a spindle bearing cracks, or a specialized bracket wears out in the absolute peak of the summer cutting rush, their local stocking parts source is practically non-existent. Dealerships are currently throwing massive, desperate clearance markdowns at these units just to clear out dead floor plan inventory, but buyers are still walking right past the display because they refuse to buy a machine that has been completely orphaned by its own factory support network. Now we get to the one that fits this whole rotting on the lot phenomena more literally than anything else on our list. The country clipper Jazzy. Now, we have to be incredibly fair here because this is not a story about a poorly engineered, flimsy piece of junk. In fact, it is almost the exact opposite. Country Clipper is built by a tight-knit, independent outfit called Shivers out of Corydon, Iowa. And these guys have been quietly turning out heavy-duty zero-turns for decades. And when you look at the raw physical build, they genuinely get some incredible things right. Their patented flip-up, stand-up cutting deck is honestly a stroke of genius. Instead of a homeowner crawling across a filthy garage floor on their back just to scrape out wet grass or swap a dull blade, the entire deck assembly tilts completely vertical on a hinge so you can service the spindles standing straight up in about 60 seconds flat. The deck itself is a rugged, fully welded steel fabrication. The spindles are remarkably heavy-duty, and it spins a highly efficient 3-blade configuration instead of a cheaped-out twin-blade layout. On structural merit alone, this machine punches way above what its little-known regional name suggests. So why exactly are these incredibly capable machines sitting completely untouched and collecting dust on dealer floors as we move through 2026? It comes down to a brutal cocktail of 3 strategic blunders that have absolutely nothing to do with how well the machine cuts grass. First, the corporate team made a massive compromise right on the engine deck. The base Jazzy is powered by a 24-horsepower Kohler Courage engine. For anyone who knows commercial outdoor power, the Courage line is Kohler's lower-tier, cost-cutting residential platform, completely lacking the commercial-grade internal filtration, heavy-duty bearings, and bulletproof reputation of their premium Command or Confidant engines. For a machine asking between $4,000 to $5,000 out of a buyer's pocket, dropping a budget-tier residential engine into the chassis is a massive red flag that drives serious buyers away instantly. Second, the entire brand relies heavily on a unique single-joystick steering control system. While Country Clipper markets this joystick as a revolutionary, effortless way to drive, real-world owners consistently warn that the internal valving is incredibly touchy and disorienting. If you hit a small bump or twitch your wrist near a structural retaining wall, that ultra-sensitive steering curve can violently pivot the machine straight into an accident, creating a steep learning curve that scares traditional lap bar buyers right back to familiar territory. But the final nail in the coffin for the Jazzy is the absolute invisibility of its brand equity and the devastating financial hit that comes with it. Because the manufacturer lacks the massive nationwide marketing machine of a John Deere or a Cub Cadet, their independent dealer network is incredibly thin, making replacement parts and localized warranty support a massive logistical gamble. This lack of brand recognition bleeds directly into a brutal, vertical drop in resale value. The moment you drive a brand new Jazzy off the showroom floor, the depreciation hits like a freight train, with used units turning up on the secondary market for as low as $1,500 to $2,700. That is an absolute slaughterhouse of equity for a piece of equipment that costs 2 to 3 times that amount brand new. The ultimate proof that the factory is completely panicking is that as of right now in 2026, Country Clipper has been aggressively pushing what they officially call special program pricing through participating dealerships right through the end of July. That polished corporate phrasing is just a desperate way of admitting that dealer inventory has completely stalled out. The flooring interest is eating into their margins, and they are forced to slash prices just to stop these heavy-duty orphans from rotting on the lot permanently. To close out this list, we have to look at the absolute grand finale of lot sitters, the Dixie Chopper Classic. For years, Dixie Chopper boldly marketed themselves as the world's fastest lawnmower, building an intense, cult-like following among commercial cutters who wanted pure, unadulterated American horsepower, heavy-grade steel, and zero corporate gimmicks. The Classic lineup is a literal tank of a machine, featuring a massively overbuilt, isolated operator platform, a brutally thick 7-gauge fabricated cutting deck, and massive rear-drive tires designed to tear through acreage at terrifying speeds. But if you want to know why these high-performance beasts are sitting completely abandoned and rotting out in the elements on dealer lots in 2026, you have to look at how a legendary brand can completely lose its footing in a hyper-competitive, modern market. The single biggest mechanical roadblock for the Classic is that its core engineering is effectively trapped in a time capsule. Dixie Chopper has stubbornly stuck to an old-school, ultra-basic design layout that completely ignores the modern demand for refined operator comfort. While competing high-end brands are engineering sophisticated multi-point internal suspension systems and electronic fuel injection systems that save a commercial cutter thousands in fuel costs, the Classic still relies on a brutally stiff, bone-jarring ride and thirsty, carbureted big block engines. For a commercial cutter spending 8 to 10 hours a day in the seat, choosing the Classic means choosing lower back pain and massive fuel bills over the refined, smooth-riding tech of the modern era. This outdated design philosophy translates directly into a disastrous value proposition on the financial side. Because Dixie Chopper builds these machines with such dense, heavy-duty raw steel, the price tag on a Classic easily skyrockets deep into the $12,000 to $15,000 commercial bracket. At that extreme price point, today's landscape professionals expect flawless corporate stability, nationwide parts availability, and guaranteed resale protection. Instead, Dixie Chopper's corporate history has been a chaotic game of musical chairs, surviving multiple ownership changes, factory shutdowns, and complete corporate reboots over the last decade. This corporate instability has completely destroyed the brand's local safety net. Smart buyers walk onto a dealer lot in 2026, look at a $15,000 Classic sitting in the sun, and immediately realize that the regional dealer network is dangerously thin. If a specialized hydraulic pump blows or a proprietary deck lift component cracks during the absolute peak of the spring rush, waiting weeks for a boutique factory shipment to arrive can completely bankrupt a commercial cutting business. Dealerships are actively slapping these massive machines with thousands of dollars in direct dealer discounts and desperate floor plan write-offs just to get them off their books. But the modern commercial buyer looks right past the raw horsepower, recognizes the massive logistical gamble of owning an orphaned platform, and leaves these legendary beasts to rust on the lot completely unbought. And that brings us to the end of this video. The biggest takeaway here is simple. In 2026, reputation alone is no longer enough. Buyers are comparing specs, durability, dealer support, and long-term value more closely than ever before. And some zero-turns are losing that comparison the moment shoppers start doing their homework. That is why certain models keep getting discounted, keep sitting under the showroom lights, and keep getting passed over for something better. Not because they cannot cut grass, but because the market has changed and buyers have become harder to convince. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more mower reviews, industry insights, and buyer guides. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell me which zero-turn on today's list surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.